Please be seated. One of the fun things that happens this time of the year is I get a lot of Christmas cards. I get cards from all of you, and I get cards from our friends and family that are around the country, people that maybe we don't see very much. And the new thing now is this including a family picture or something of what happens. We got one here in the office of intern Alex and his wife Emily, and Elaine and I were talking about it. We didn't recognize for a moment their daughter Amelia on the front, because when you don't see the person every day, suddenly they grow up and you wonder, where did time go? She looked so big and so old in this picture. You know, and I kind of feel that way with this gospel reading for today, because it's only 5 days after Christmas and Jesus is already 12, right? Where did time go in this story? What is this story even doing as part of this Christmas season? Maybe it's saying something to us that pointing to the incarnation that is bigger, something more than just a baby in a manger. I think it's appropriate for us because oftentimes this time of year we spend a little more time with families, and so here we get a glimpse of how this holy family worked, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And it's good to know that even Jesus' family wasn't this kind of Leave It to Beaver where everything went according to plan, because he ran off and freaked his parents out, right? I could even argue that he gave his parents a little lip in his response. Didn't you know where I was going to be? Didn't you know I would be in my father's house? Or the older translation, about my father's business, right? Which is, I kind of like that as well. I wonder if Mary's memory of that miraculous birth started to fade when she heard those words coming out of Jesus' mouth. You know, but somewhere in there, I take comfort in thinking that Jesus was part of a normal, ordinary family with normal, ordinary family conflicts, because that means that Jesus knows a little bit about what I experience, what we experience, that there's a part of that there's incarnation in that message for me. And this story is really, it's a balance between the ordinary and the extraordinary, right? You have this child of God who runs off, this ordinary child of God, but yet, it's the Son of God. You can almost hear the early church reading this story and wrestling. Wait, I thought it was God. I thought he was God. Oh, I thought he was human. And they just settle on the answer, both. Yes, truly God, truly human. This mixture. And Mary and Joseph, they act as an adult would when a child goes missing. They frantically search. It takes a little more time. It maybe sounds funny to us, but the way they traveled, they would travel with family, and they moved a day, so it was a day somewhere and a day back and a day searching, and they frantically search until they find this Son of God. And perhaps what they see is, I wonder if perhaps Jesus didn't grow up too fast for their expectations of who he would be and how he would act with them. And they weren't quite ready to let go of those expectations when they find him again in the temple. And so I wonder how often that happens for us. How are we frantically searching for this Son of God who maybe seems to have gone missing this Christmas? And we search thoroughly through all those presents under our tree, and no, he's not there. Maybe we sit and we stare at a nativity scene that's set up in our homes, right? And we're longing, trying to remember this childhood Christ that maybe we just admired or held or looked at with this childhood intensity, and we long for that Christ of long ago. We can't find it. We aren't quite ready to let go of those expectations for who that Christ would be. When Mary finds Jesus, she asks, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Didn't you know we were searching for you with great anxiety?" And I wonder if our question isn't the same. Do we find ourselves asking those same questions of God following Christmas? Why have you treated us like this? We just heard a message about Christmas love. Why have you treated us like this? When the candle light goes out. Why have you treated us like this when our expectations of that infant king don't match up with what we see in this world? Why have you treated us like this? So we have these images, don't we, in the first and second readings. And I think they're images of what the Father's business, the Father's house is all about, what it looks like. We have this image of Samuel, who was a child blessed to Hannah. It was barren. She was barren. And so in gratitude for God giving her a son, she gives Samuel over to a life of service in the temple. And here we hear this moment of compassion where Samuel is clothed with actually, literally a linen of love from his parent who visits him and is grateful once again. Perhaps this child who was given over in poor priestly service in the temple, perhaps this child, Samuel, foreshadows another child who will be born and wrapped in a linen cloth and will later be found too lost in the temple. Perhaps somewhere in these images of young ones, poor, and the powerless ones, it gives voice to the young and to the powerless who suffer in these past days and in our life, and in these past weeks in our world. And perhaps it speaks of a God who comes in those powerless moments, in those powerless ways, to do holy work, to do this business of God. This Christ becomes obedient, it says, to these human parents. And I think to live fully into what the Colossians text says, because living is part of this Christmas promise. Because living in light of the incarnation means that God has put on that which is us. God has put on flesh that we might be able to put on that which is holy. We might be able to clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, gentleness, patience, to love one another. Perhaps we're like Mary and Joseph, and we end up looking for Jesus in all the wrong places. Because this 5-day-old Jesus is going to grow up to not be what we expect. It's going to be found where least expected, where the wood of the manger turns into a cross. Here's the story of salvation. That God was born, lived, died, and rose. That God did those things to be about God's business of putting an end to all of our searching. That's the way of God. That's the way of the gospel. It means breaking those expectations, but Christ shows us that way to God. Because here's how the story ends. After 3 days, Jesus is found alive and well, granted in a place that they didn't expect. Don't you think Luke foreshadows 3 days that will happen 21 years later, where Jesus will again be found alive and well in a place where no one expects? And so for us today, in our search for meaning and purpose, Christ is found in a simple meal of bread and wine at this table, in a place most unexpected, and in a promise for future days where hope abounds and where love wins the day. And in all of our searching will come to an end in that life that God intends. To that God be all glory, honor, and praise, now and always. Amen.